Hi everybody, I'm John Gray, Director of Further Education at Emsi. I'm delighted that we're able to capture this case study recently featuring Edd Brown from Weston College. In my opinion, Weston College are one of the best colleges in the country at using labour market information in their curriculum planning process. And in this video, Edd talks us through how they're using that information in their ID programme.
Thanks, John, for that no pressure introduction. But I'll, as John said, we've been working with Emsi and John in particular for the last couple of years, and I have a particular interest in Emsi products and the data that it provides us with. We've got a couple of products with Emsi. We've got Career Coach, which our student services team use, and I use more extensively the Analyst product. And we use it in two ways, really. One is we use it like most colleges for their strategic planning, and we look at progressions, and we look at the labour market in terms of what provision we should be offering, which is clearly aligned to the intent focus from Ofsted. But we've more recently started to really drill into that data and look at the skills behind the jobs that different people are requiring, and we're using that to inform our PSD programme. So that's really what we're just going to sort of give you an overview on today. What I'm going to try and do in the next sort of 15 minutes or so is just give you a little bit of an overview on the context of that PSD programme and how it's set up, because I think that's important to understand where we are and where we've come from and where we've got to. And then I'll talk you through a little bit about how we're using the Emsi data. And then I'm a very transparent person. I'll give you some of my honest reflections about where we are with that at the moment and some of the things that we're considering to improve that programme for next year. So that's my plan, and then I'm happy to take questions afterwards. So I've been back at the college for just over 2 years, and when I came back at sort of the start of 18-19, our PSD programs as they were then, if I'm brutally honest, were not fit for purpose in any way, shape or form. So what we had is teachers delivering PSD, which was a timetabled session on our study programs, and people and staff were delivering sessions in isolation. So we had a generic scheme of learning that had all the sort of skills, attitudes, behaviours that you would expect around communication, teamwork, resilience, all the types of things that you would want. But actually what was happening was staff were delivering those things in isolation. So we were delivering teamwork in a one-off session. We were delivering resilience in a one-off session. And these are behaviours and attitudes and skills that can't be developed in 1.5 hours a week. They need to be developed over time. So we needed to make some changes to that programme. And around the same time that the draft for the EIF was launched, we started to really explore what it wanted to look like. And we recreated that PSD into ID. And ID for us is all about our learners' individual development. And it was impacted by COVID last year. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We had a good sort of first term and a little bit. I'm not quite sure we fully saw the impact of our ID programme at the end of last year, because some staff found the development of those skills with learners much more challenging in a virtual world. But we ran ID for level 1, level 2, and we ran a programme called Futures Academy for level 3 learners, and that had quite a strong digital focus in preparing learners for the workplace. And through our own internal quality assurance mechanisms, our learning walk feedback basically said to us that learners on level 1, level 2 programs were really clear about the ID skills that they were developing and the purpose of those, but they weren't as clear on level 3 programs. So we needed to again redesign that moving into this year, and that was where we started to explore the use of Emsi. So we've evolved that now, and I'll take you through the process that we go through with our curriculum. But we use labour market. It is, I think, primarily based on Emsi data, but I know John won't mind me saying it's not all based on Emsi data. We do, use our local networks. We run advisory boards for all our different sector areas, and that feedback from local employers feeds into the programme as well. So we've brought all of our PSD programmes under the ID banner now, whereas they weren't previously. We run ID ID Pro and ID 6. So ID is at level 1 to 2 and first year level 3. ID Pro is at level 3 year 2, and ID 6 is a bespoke program for our sixth form provision, because we wanted those learners to have a more academic feel. We wanted it to be slightly different, so we've differentiated it in that way. And the biggest thing for me was moving away from this isolation delivery and making our ID program feel very much part of the study program, which it hadn't been historically. So we had to do quite a bit of work in readiness for this academic year to address that. And we've also now brought our work-based learning under ID as well. So the development of skills, knowledge and behaviours sits under our ID as well. So there's consistency across all of our provision for that. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour in terms of where we were, where we are, and evolving it a little bit more as we go through this academic year. So what does that look like on the ground? We start, and actually that process for us as a college starts this half term. We start our planning for new curriculum now. So we're already, this morning, actually having conversations with staff, reflecting on their provision for this year and evolving that. So what curriculum will go through is that process of identifying the ID skills that they want to develop for their learners, and they plug in to our tutorial system the skills that they want to develop. They won't do that quite so early, but they're starting the conversations and the planning now. And we ask our curriculum to focus on 10 skills, and that is differentiated. And I'll give you a brief example in a minute where we do differentiate at level 1, level 2 compared to level 3, but we pick 10 core skills that we want our learners to develop. And then through our induction and diagnostic period, we build in a project-based activity which starts to test those skills for learners. So we have a really clear starting point about where learners are against those skills, behaviours and attitudes. And then through our tutorial system, the learner will pick 6 core skills that they want to focus on through the year, and that underpins our tutorial process and our target setting. And then we develop those through all of our provisions. So we do have ID as a timetabled session, which is an hour and a half each week. What we find in curriculum is it works less effectively if it's delivered in isolation as an ID session. We've got some really good case studies and examples where that is being done well, but we find it's much more effective if it's embedded into all of the curriculum. So if you're teaching on a vocational technical program, those ID skills are weaved into all of your program. And then through our tutorial system, learners undertake 3 assessments throughout the academic year. So they do a starting one, a mid-year, and then an end-of-year assessment. So we can measure progress against the skills. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. Obviously, John will have these and can share them, but just gives you a really quick overview there of the process. We have quite a lot of guidance for personal tutors and ID tutors in terms of the intent of our programs. We've written and differentiated the intent at level 1, level 2 and level 3. And we hang everything around teaching, learning and assessment, around being ready to learn, ready for work, ready for life. That's our teaching, learning and assessment strapline. And if something doesn't anchor back to one of those 3 strands, then we really question whether or not we need it for our curriculum. And I don't always win that battle, but we try and anchor things back to those core elements. And then we have a predefined menu of skills that curriculum can select from. And this is an ever-growing list of skills, and we certainly saw this menu increase over the sort of last summer into the start of this year as people drilled into the Emsi data and said, actually, I want that skill in there, I want that skill. So because it's an in-house built system, our tutorial system, we're able to bespoke that and make that really fit for purpose for us. So just a really quick overview there about some of the work behind the scenes. So what does that look like from an Emsi point of view? So these, I've got 2 examples to show you. One is for digital and the other is for media. So this is the reports that you'll all be familiar with from the development report side. I've just run a report here, which has just pulled in a range of digital jobs over the last 2 years in the southwest region in our WECA area. And you can see all the stuff that you colleagues on this call are familiar with. But the bit on the right hand side of that screen is the bit that I'm really interested in when I'm working with curriculum on this. So when you go through that development report, you can drill down into the common skills. Now, what you get on the development report is you get the hard skills, and then you get these top common skills. We tend to avoid the hard skills because we make the assumption that our qualifications cover those particular hard skills. We're really interested in those top common skills, and we find that there's often a bit of a debate in curriculum about whether some of those are skills and behaviours and attitudes, but that's always our starting point for the data. So that's the top 10 skills for digital in our region based on just over 93,000 job adverts. And this is then what it looks like for our curriculum. So I've expanded that list a little bit on the right for digital. So I've just expanded that into the top 20 skills. And on the left-hand side, what you can see there is our ID tracker. So that is a screen from our tutorial system. This is taken from, is actually one of our digital T-level learners. And I've highlighted in yellow the skills that have been mapped across. And you can see they're not all mapped across. And I think it would wouldn't be right in all sectors for us to pick all of the top 10 skills, because some learners aren't going to be ready to develop some of those skills. So we give curriculum that little bit of license. So you can see on this particular example, maths features in the top 20 skills for digital. That innovation's number 4, we've got it classed as digital innovation, so make that connection. Communication and problem solving are the 4 core skills. And what you can see in the middle of that spiders diagram is, depending on how big it is on your screen, there's a green line, which is a sort of an inner line on the spider's web. That was the learner's initial assessment in terms of where they felt they were post-induction against those core skills. And then that browner line, which is a bit more of an outer line on some of the skills, is where they've reassessed that. And that reassessment would have come just after the Christmas period. So what this learner is saying to us is that they feel they've developed in that innovation element. Their time management and communication are largely the same, but we've started to see some development in problem solving skills, reflection and commercial awareness. So that's really rich data for us internally, which we can obviously use to determine whether or not we think learners are making sufficient progress, or actually where they're not, it allows curriculum opportunity to resequence, replan and focus some of their activities on some of those skills. And also some of our curriculum may have chosen to develop some of those skills a little bit more later in the year, particularly some of the more challenging ones like critical thinking or analysis may choose to be planned and really developed later on in the academic year. Just another example for you on this one. This is taken from media, and you can see some similar skills, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Curriculum here feel networking, professionalism are important in that sector, but they've made the connection from problem solving, research, English, maths, again, innovation into the media. So there's two really good examples. Now, you might look at that and go, well, yeah, that's fine, but problem solving, communication, research, these are all pretty generic skills. The big thing for us really this year was actually contextualizing that and making it really curriculum relevant for every particular sector area. So we introduced a new tool, I guess, which is we've called a skills map. And the idea here, I felt in terms of where we were last year, we had pretty good intent in our curriculum. Our data across a lot of KPIs stacks up pretty well, but the implementation in between actually I think was a little bit inconsistent. I'm not quite sure all of our curriculum had grasped sequencing, interleaving and some of the key things we were trying to develop. So I wanted to force their hand a little bit into rethinking about that in the start of this year, particularly around induction and that diagnostic with the period of lost learning. So what Curriculum Now Complete is this skills map in which they map out through the year the skills, knowledge and behaviours that they want to develop. This is one page of a 3-page document. And the first page sort of brings in some of the Emsi data and the skills. We put job postings, average earnings into there to really contextualize that for our learners. And then on this example, you can see where the curriculum team have started to plan for the development of some of those ID skills throughout the year. And you can see that some of those are being developed early on in induction in term 1, which is that blue information there, as we go into term 2, the yellow, and then particularly in this example where it's sort of a culmination in an employer set project where some of those skills will be brought together, and that's written by curriculum in the summer, and it's given to learners as part of their induction, and we test that when we go out. We're not necessarily physically this academic year, but through some virtual learning walks, and certainly moving into next year, we're going to test that more robustly in terms of what's a learner's understanding about their skills map, because when we spoke to learners last year, they couldn't always tell us what they'd done previously, how that helped them to get to where they are, and what they were progressing onto, what was coming next in the curriculum, and why what they were doing now was important. And the skills map, I think, is a document that is starting to close that gap for us. So that's there, and I'm happy to share a blank template of that with John, so you can share that for people to have a little look at. So just my last slide in terms of where are we now and sort of what next. For me, the concept of ID is working well. I'm really happy with the way that curriculum have embraced that, and the way that they've designed their ID program and selected their ID skills. But I think we've got to be a little bit more consistent in some of our areas, and we're going to do that by reducing the skills. I think 10's too many to be built into the program. I think we probably will end up looking at maybe 5 or 6 core skills that we want curriculum to really focus on. We've got a little bit of work to do to strengthen the skills into the skills map and how those skills are being developed over time. And that ties in terms of how some of our curriculum plan to deliver some of their ID skills. And really look at the reporting. So that spider's web that I showed you, we can get some reporting out of that. So we can at headline level, but it's not particularly sophisticated. So we've got a little bit of work to do with my data team and the developers to really pull that data out and make it more useful for our curriculum. So it's useful at headline, but we could do with it a little bit more granular than that and really get down to course level. We've got to do a little bit of work on our induction and really capture starting points more effectively. I think there's a risk when you leave it to a sort of subjective judgment of a learner, you're going to get some inconsistencies, and we've got to do a little bit of work to tighten that up. And we're going to do a little bit more work, and if, depending on as and when we can get back to more face-to-face, we're going to test that a little bit more face-to-face with our learners. So conceptually, we're really happy with where we are. The program is working well, but like everything in its sort of first 12 to 18 months, new initiative, it could do with a little bit more consistency in some places, but generally we're pretty happy with where we are with it. And I think, John, that's my slide. So I don't know if there's any questions or anything come through, or people want to ask me any questions.
Thanks ever so much for that. I think you definitely lived up to my my introduction. I think there's the work that's gone into producing that is phenomenal, and I think certainly I'm sure colleagues will be interested and appreciate how sophisticated that is, and having your own system to map that as well. Does anybody have any questions for Edd? Please feel free just to unmute yourself and shout up. You're amongst friends here, so we'll keep things informal. I'll just check the chat as well.
I'll ask a question, John, if I may.
Yes, mate, certainly.
Hiya, thanks for that. Really informative, and there's probably some head scratching that I'd love to share with you over time. I suppose my question is reflecting the ID system back on the learners, and how well I guess throughout their time with you. I guess more importantly, when they go out and they're fronted by employers in interviews, are they able to articulate their development in those areas and tell a story of how their resilience or their communication has developed over their time in learning? I'm quite interested in that, really.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think from last year, I would have said level 1, level 2 learners were more confident because there was that stronger connection with the ID skills that were really developing. And because we had the level 3 badged under the Futures Academy, there was a missing link and a missing connection for me there. It's much stronger this year. I think we're going to, personally at this point, I think we're going to find it really hard to test the impact of some of that, because for me, it's going to all be badged, you know, under or around some of our work experience industry placement as well. And obviously we've just got fewer learners going out on there at the moment. So I think we're going to find it harder, which is why I'm so keen to get back into face-to-face so we can test it a little bit more. I've personally found that much harder in lockdown to test some of those initiatives and those themes, but I'm confident from last year with what level 1, level 2 learners were telling us when we tested that through learning walks, we've made some progress. And I've got some snippets and some case studies where we've had learners go out for industry placement and employers telling us how well prepared those learners are. So I'm confident that we've got it. I just, if I'm honest with you and say amongst friends, I don't think I can put my hand on my heart at this point and say I could confidently say that for all of our learners at this point. That's my summer term challenge, to be honest.
No, I think you're articulating probably an everybody challenge in that respect, and one approach we've taken is to try and embed those employment skills as we badge them into their learning objectives, and whether they be short term or longer term, how we measure progress in there. But it's certainly an ongoing challenge for us all, and I think your processes look really interesting. I'd probably like to debate it a little bit more over time.
I'm happy to. I mean, I could take the crude top level data and I could say, yeah, based on last year, I know 93% of learners jumped by 1 or 2 points on the ID tracker in communication, but I don't know. I feel like I need more first-hand evidence to prove that that's genuine, if I'm honest. Like all data, that tracker is just a starting point for me. So yeah, that's the little conundrum we're working through at the moment, to be honest with you, Mick.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Great question. Another question just popped through in the chat. Do you develop the skills module across curriculum with generic modules for standardized structures, or do you allow local interpretations?
Local interpretations, because I'm just always a bit concerned about providing centralized resources, because people often just take them and deliver them in the way they've been given to you, and they don't often contextualize them and make them relevant. So we haven't gone down that road. And also because of the breadth of our provision, what a skill looks like in public services is going to look very different in business. So it's quite hard to produce centralized resources for that particular reason. So we give curriculum that autonomy to do it however they see fit.
I hope that you enjoyed that fascinating case study. And if you'd like any further information about that particular case study or help using labour market information in your curriculum planning process, then please reach out to your Emsi account manager.